General KKO, is she your candidate? In a military account stained with a chilling air, among the iron-blooded soldiers in iron armor, two people seemed out of place. Ryan, who just spoke up, is one of them. Wearing a blue and white dress on him, he doesn't look like a soldier on the battlefield at all, but like a playful nobleman. At this moment, he is looking at the girl who entered the tent with scrutiny. The wine-red hair, the beautiful figure is simply covered with black leather armor, and the frosty face is firm. Lord Meredith, Katarina was trained by me. She has enough ability to complete this mission. Sneak into the enemy camp and kill Demetrius. Sitting at the top of the military account, Du KKO is a middle-aged man with a resolute face, and there is no doubt in his words. Follow your will, General KKO. Seeing the other party's resolute attitude, Ryan bowed slightly and stopped talking. This is the Noxian tent. As a Noxian, I never hesitate to wait for others to prove themselves. He saw the tenacity like a blade in this girl named Katarina, and the scars on her fair skin all showed the strength and hard work of the girl. It's a pity that this blade has just been sharpened, and it's still too new to be handy. Looking at the back of the other party leaving with dissatisfaction, Ryan let out a leisurely sigh. After the rest of the generals left the camp, Du KKO frowned at Ryan, who was sitting indifferently. Your Excellency Meredith, there are rumors that you have discerning eyes and people in the Immortal Fortress. Katarina is my most outstanding eldest daughter, and is known as a genius assassin who must surpass me. I don't understand your concerns. She's good enough, but this is her first mission. There was a slight smile on the corner of Ryan's mouth, and his right thumb and were interlaced, and he snapped his fingers crisply. Suddenly, the flowing water poured into the center of him and Duke Cao, gathered into a ball and spread out, forming a circle like a mirror. The rippling water is like looking at flowers in a mirror. When the ripples appeared, the image appeared in the mirror. Inside the water mirror, Katarina was carrying two sharp daggers, like a shadow dancer, hiding in the quiet night, silently. In less than a quarter of an hour, she successfully entered the enemy camp and sneaked away towards the largest one. Young people always have their own naive thoughts, thinking that they are strong enough to kill the commander of the other side, and that they can dominate the direction of the war. Ryan ignored Du KKO's ashen face, and still had a calm smile on the corner of his mouth. Katarina's mission is simple, to assassinate an enemy squad leader named Demetrius. And the direction she sneaked in was the camp of the enemy commander. Under the cover of the night, Katarina avoided many obstacles and sneaked into the commander's tent. She looked at the sleeping enemy commander on the bed with mockery in her eyes. Ryan looked at this scene with interest in his eyes. Newborn calves always like to be self-righteous, so why not use their brains to think about it? Nakus can use all means to win the war, but since it is an assassination, why kill an ordinary captain instead of the highest commander of the army? Miss KKO, there is still a long way to go. Swish! In the picture displayed by the water mirror, Katarina covered the opponent's face with one hand, and the other hand held a dagger across her neck. There was no sound. In the distant Naku's camp, Du KKO witnessed everything, but his face was even more ugly. Your Majesty Meredith, your judgment is correct. She wants to prove herself too much, to prove that she has the strength to end a war with her own hands. But who would have thought that the commander of the other side is a mediocre person, and Demetrius is the real troublesome existence? Ryan shook his head slightly. The point is, with her immature strength and clumsy stealth, there's no time left to assassinate Demetrius. Humph, the idiot who ruined the game. The war that should have ended without damage has to be reborn. Du KKO slapped the water mirror with both hands, completely smashing Katarina's happy face inside it, with anger on her face. The replacement of the assassination target has brought forward the time for the decisive battle. Before I set off, I had clearly reminded her of the importance and danger of this mission, but it turned out to be a who only knew what to do. Having said that, Du KKO stood up and was about to walk outside the tent. General KKO, what are you going to do? Kill Demetrius with your own hands, and then send that trash on the road. Nakus doesn't need losers. Du Cao didn't stop, his body exuding a biting coldness. He is a war madman of Nakus, and his most outstanding talent is not that like an artistic war commander, but that he himself is the sharpest assassin of Nakus. We shouldn't be so harsh, everyone is not born to be successful, I believe she still has Nakus in her heart. And you, General KKO, maybe it's time to make a choice. Ryan is still like a nobleman elegant, with a slight smile on the corners of his mouth. Du KKO's footsteps when he left the camp stopped slightly. He listened to the increasingly loud noises outside the camp, and replied coldly, Lord Meredith, I need a little time. Kui Farley is willing to give you time. The next performance will be our sincerity. Ryan stood up and took off the white glove on his right hand, revealing the dark blue ring on his ring finger. With Ryan's twisting, the ring suddenly lit up with a pale blue shimmer, and a huge circle rose with Ryan as the center, with various unknown runes carved on it. The hem of the blue and white dress swayed with the wind, and Ryan stood in the center of the magic circle, with the magic circle and runes wrapped around him, like a king of arcane magic. The blue arcane light shot up from the tent and spread out in the sky. In an instant, there was lightning and thunder, and a little yellow raindrops fell in the sky. These raindrops fell from the sky, but they seemed to violate the common sense of physics, and rushed towards a group of troops charging towards the Noxian camp in the dark. The leading general of the army is a knight with silver and white heavy armor, riding on a warhorse also wrapped in heavy armor. He is the hero of Shurima Demetrius. Boom! The sky thundered again, and yellow raindrops encased Shurima's army like a waterfall. The soldiers of Shurima were hit by the yellow raindrops one after another, and they let out a shrill scream, and a large number of soldiers fell down. Only Demetrius still launched a fearless charge. But the yellow raindrops had already eroded his body through the gaps in the armor. His face hidden in the iron helmet had already been eroded and rotted by the yellow raindrops. His eyes were full of grief. Trembling. But even so, he slammed his horse on his back and continued to maintain the pace of charging, trying to rush into the Noxian army that was already waiting for it. Nakus. Die. With the determination to die, Demetrius rushed into the Noxian camp alone, swinging his heavy sword vigorously, knocking down one Noxian soldier. At this moment, he is like a of war, standing among the 10,000 armies, blooming with his own light and heat. The knight's horse had already been stabbed by a spear, but he still stood upright and fought while surrounded by soldiers, trying to take away a few more enemies before he died. Ryan walked out of the tent. Yu was reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Watched quietly, with undisguised appreciation in his eyes, Demetrius, worthy of being called Naku's opponent. The blue light emitted by the ring in his hand weakened, and the sky was still raining, but the corrosive yellow color it had before was gone. Nakus respects all powerful opponents, and everyone who is not weak deserves respect. On the battlefield, Demetrius was still doing his last resistance, but Ryan had no idea of making a move. Now it's time for Du Quaco to come on stage, to put an end to this sudden battle and to make up for the mistakes of his young daughter. Katerina, will it be the key to win him over? Old boss, you really gave me a problem. Ryan sighed. Scoff. A sharp blade was inserted into the gap in Demetrius' armor, and it was Du Cao who shot it himself. As the most powerful assassin in Nakus, he disappears like a ghost, reappears, disappears again. Every time he appeared, Demetrius would have an extra scar on his body. Boom! A thunderstorm fell from the sky, illuminating the already dark battlefield. This time, it will be the last appearance of Du Quaco. He stands in front of Demetrius generously, and in the eyes of the opponents angry but powerless, the blood in his hand is not stained. The long sword was sent into the opponent's neck little by little. Du Quaco cut off his opponent's head with a blank expression, raised it above his head, and looked around at the soldiers standing around. Nakus is about to rise. The surrounding Nakus raised their weapons frantically at the same time, and shouted in unison, "For Nakus! The hustle and bustle of war is over, and Nakus has won a glorious victory." Du Quaco's army had won too many of these victories, and everything went on in an orderly fashion. As a military mage assigned by the Empire, Ryan sat in his independent tent and prepared a pot of Noxian spirits, which seemed to be waiting for some guests. After a while, the curtain was pushed open, and the tall and straight Du Quaco walked in first. Behind him, Katerina, whose face was ashen, seemed to have completely lost the firm belief she had before. Ryan admired it slightly, and then focused his attention on Du Quaco again. "I brought the spirits from the immortal fortress. I heard that General Quaco wants to drink a drink whenever he wins. You don't look like someone from Trifali at all, but you look like you belong to Black Rose." Du Quaco stepped forward, grabbed the jug, and happily took a big gulp into his mouth. The flame-like alcohol burned his throat, and it was undoubtedly the strongest alcohol in Nakus. No one stipulates that Trifali is a war madman, and Black Rose is not all a delicate mage. Ryan shrugged slightly. Trifari was secretly established by his former boss to reshape the decaying empire of Nakus. The Black Roses were established in the shadows at the very beginning of Nakus, and the change of the imperial throne has their shadows. In fact, he had a choice. The Pale Lady of Black Rose personally invited him. As long as he betrayed his old boss, he could not only join Black Rose, but also be given immortality by him. However, he sincerely admired his old boss. In the Battle of Presidion, when the Empire abandoned them, and his comrades were almost dead, he brought himself to support the difficult ones and survived. After the memory was over, Ryan stared at Du Quaco. "General Quaco, we Trifali are tired of the imperial infighting, it's time for Nakus to rise." Ryan wasn't originally Noxian, or even of this world. He traveled through Dalmatia and Ionia, but eventually Nakus accepted him. This is the best soil for talented people. Whether it is force, magic, business, politics, or alchemy, as long as it is beneficial to the Empire, everything will be accepted. Nakus decides class by ability, and height by strength. This alone is enough to make Ryan identify with the Empire. After all, no one would think that he is an incompetent mediocrity. Du Quaco was still drinking heavily, but his expression became more and more sober as he ingested the alcohol. The meaning of Ryan's words is very clear: the other party came with a kind invitation from Trifali. Although he is powerful, he does not need to stand in line at this moment. But in the face of the great changes that the Empire is about to usher in, he had to make plans early. Having made a choice in his heart, he glanced at his daughter, who was still in a state of lost soul behind him, and Du Quaco said coldly, "I'm a general who opened up new territories. I only follow the orders of the upper echelons of the Empire. I'm here to say something else." Ryan also glanced at Katerina with a smile on his face. "Please say it." "I don't need reckless soldiers in my army." Du Quaco's voice was cold. When the voice fell, Ryan could clearly feel Katerina's body trembling slightly. Maybe her heart has collapsed, but because of the rigorous training and teaching, she will not be able to rush out. Ryan's position was different from that of Katerina, and he knew exactly what Du Quaco meant. Du Quaco didn't want to take the initiative to stand in line, but the situation in the Empire had reached a serious point. An eldest daughter who was expelled from the family might be the hope of the Quaco family, and there was no father's expectation for the eldest daughter. Trifari doesn't do charity. Ryan smiled. He is cooperating with Du Quaco's father's performance. Although he does not agree with the other party's idea of expecting his children to become talents because of hatred, this is a family matter, and fathers are willing to be tools for their daughters to grow up, so he can't say anything. Hearing that she was being evaluated by the two like a cargo, Katerina's face was nothing different, neither angry nor hysterical, at most just a little unwilling. Nakus is like this. The strong decide the fate of the weak, and the strong will not limit the growth of the weak. Only one's own ability is the best proof to the right. Here, the cowardice in the heart must be covered with the frost on the face. Katerina understood this truth when she was 6 years old. Recently, Pichon has been a little restless, and the transactions of the imperial nobles have been damaged there. His Majesty the Emperor wants to hand it over to me, but I prefer war. Judging from the recent army transfer of Nakos, I can't make peace with it for the time being. The Piltover War, said Du Quaco. He was very interested in killing people and setting fires in Pichon. But if he just went to Pichon to be a diplomat, it would be a complete waste of his time. His implication was that he wanted to give up this troublesome errand. This is not just a troublesome errand, Ryan's representative, Treferi, needs an excuse. With this pretext, he can hold the lifeblood of many nobles. Piltover. In recent years, because of the rapid development of Hexfield, I really want to meet and see that Gestalis. We have taken over this matter with Miss KKO. Ryan readily agreed, and the outcome of the Battle of Presidion made him hate war a little bit. He had heard that Piedmont was a peaceful city, and it would be nice to take a vacation there. However, there was one thing he had to confirm. General KKO, what's my name this time? He gestured to Katerina. Katerina has been Trifali's subordinate since today, and KKO will have no such person in the future. I will give you the KKO family law, which can represent the will of me and the KKO family. Du Quaco said in a cold tone, and after he finished speaking, he walked out the door with a little bottle left, as if he didn't want to stay any longer. After a while, Ryan stopped playing with the right hand of the KKO family magic batch, and turned to look at Katerina, who was habitually cold-faced like his father. Ryan Meredith, one of the founders of Trifali, you should be familiar with me. After listening to Ryan's introduction, Katerina made a little movement. She knelt on one knee and lowered her head. Every Noxian has heard of you, Your Excellency. I'm here to serve you. Get up first. Ryan waved Katerina to get up, leaned back on the chair and said, I have heard countless times when I was in the Immortal Fortress. You read www.yuyuganshu.com. Katerina is the most talented assassin of the KKO family, and will definitely surpass Du KKO's genius in the future. I would love to hear from you opinion on that. It's just a piece of trash who failed the first mission. Katerina laughed at herself. In today's battle, 25 Noxian soldiers were killed by Demetrius, and every loss of life was her responsibility. She has no pity for life in her heart, but she will not deny the mistakes she made. What do you think the problem is? Ryan asked. I failed to obey the order. Once again, I am confident that I can kill Demetrius. When Katerina mentioned the name, she was full of confidence. In her eyes, if she doesn't make her own decisions, it may be a perfect mission. Miss Katerina, I don't think so. We are both Noxians and know each other. Please answer me seriously. What did you think after beheading the enemy commander? Ryan was indifferent, looked directly at Katerina. Katerina opened her mouth slightly, and finally replied sullenly, I want to continue the assassination mission. Killing the commander is a bonus, it's definitely not a mistake. Your mistake is just 1 point. Ryan didn't finish speaking, but Katerina already understood what he meant. Her fists were clenched tightly, and her eyes were filled with strong unwillingness, but she still took the initiative to clarify, I have made my choice, but I don't have the strength to make it. Very good. Ryan nodded with satisfaction. Keep this state of mind. Tomorrow, an airship will take us to Piltover. There, I hope you can complete the transformation. According to your arrangement, Your Excellency. Is this Piltover? To be known as a city of advanced and evolution, it is indeed different from Nakos. Stepping off the airship engraved with the Nakos logo, Ryan stepped into the land of Piltover. The city-state of Piltover is not big, but looking down from the Hex Feet Gate at a high point, you can see a large number of exquisite low-rise buildings, spacious streets, and the shadow of technology can be seen everywhere. There are not only sporadic airships flying far away in the sky, but also some sporadic flying machines, which are said to be gadgets made by Piltover College. The ground of Pitchin is covered with white stone bricks, and the low-rise buildings look luxurious and expensive. Even if you just look at it from a distance, you can feel the magnificence of the city paved with gold coins. Good afternoon, Your Excellency Meredith. I'm Mel Merdalda, and welcome to Piltover. The elegant black-skinned woman stood in front of the Nako's airship and bowed slightly to show her respect. Ryan glanced at her indifferently, and nodded slightly in return. Ms. Merdalda, good afternoon. I have met your mother a few times. She is a heroic and powerful warrior. In Piltover, please call me Senator Merdalda. Mel's tone was slightly dissatisfied. Mr. Merdalda, you are as naive as your mother said. Congressman of Piltover? This is far less than the status of Merdalda's son in my eyes, even if you are an abandoned child. Ignoring the ugly-looking Mel Merdalda, Ryan stepped in the direction of leaving the flying port. Katerina followed behind him, with mockery in her sympathetic eyes. But on second thought, he seems to be no different from Mel, and he is also the most incompetent next generation in his father's mouth. She clenched her fists tightly, as if only the pain of her fingertips piercing her palm could calm her down. Seeing the two go away, although Mel still had anger in his eyes, he forced a smile on his face and led Ryan towards Piltover City. No one Mrs. Piltover knew Nakos better than she, a group of arrogant people who only expressed kindness to the strong. And the current Piltover does not have the qualifications for Nakos to express goodwill. Piltover calls himself neutral, but not only needs to provide Nakos with war supplies, but also help them transport soldiers to fight in various countries. The current Piltover can only be regarded as a subsidiary of Nakos at best. Lord Meredith, I don't know why you came this time. Mel asked tentatively, one position behind Ryan. She has heard of Ryan Meredith's famous name. This madman not only followed his boss into the hinterland of Ionia, but also returned to Nakos intact. He is a powerful mage. Unfortunately, apart from Heimerding, Piltover should not be his opponent at the moment. Ryan's pace stopped slightly, and he asked, I heard that today is your evolution day. That's right, today is the biggest day of the year in Piltover. Mel didn't know why Ryan mentioned this, but he still had pride on his face. Evolution Day is a traditional festival in Piltover. There will be celebrations throughout the city, and there will be speeches in the evening, where Piltover's most representative innovations will be told about the year's new inventions. Today is undoubtedly the most important day for the outside world of this city. They need to tell the world that Piltover is still improving, still pursuing advancement and innovation. Last year, Heimerdinger's theory of magical hazards was very interesting. I would like to hear his speech today. Ryan's face filled with a faint smile. He didn't agree with Heimerdinger's idea, but just out of a mage's curiosity. How confident is Heimerdinger to say such domineering words that using magic will destroy the world and that magic should be banned in the world? Just because of this speech on the destruction of magic, many mages became hostile to Piltover, and many cut off business with Piltover. Of course, except for the Noxian military mages, most of the other mages squatted at home and only swept the snow in front of the door. If the mages can really unite to form a guild or something, let alone the weak Piltover, even the mighty Demacia would not dare to clamor for the banning of demons. If they are anxious, they will be overwhelmed by the mages. Hearing his words, Mel said meaningfully, that may disappoint Your Excellency Ryan. The speaker of this year's Evolution Day is not Heimerdinger. Oh? Interesting, there is no precedent for this. But Heimerdinger's point is indeed a bit old, and this year's speech is just Talus. Ryan guessed. He had learned about Piltover, a harbor city built for hundreds of years, and it was Heimerdinger who brought the city to its present height. But now, with Piltover building Hexagon, the trade has grown even more. Now Jess, who created Hextech, deserves his name as a speaker. Suddenly, Ryan had a strange look on his face, and even stopped moving forward. Mr. Merdalda, although the evolution day is very exciting. However, the security of your pigeon is really worrying. His eyes looked at a dilapidated airship not far away. Just now, his keen perception made him discover the fighting inside. Doesn't it mean that Piltover is a peaceful city-state? Chaos is also chaos in Zon. How does it look more chaotic than Naku's now? In Mel's dull eyes, the airship that Ryan was watching made a muffled sound, and the grey gas diffused out from below, filling the air with the fragrance of gunpowder. Damn, is this a bomb? Ryan glanced at the furious Mel, and Hiruosa said, relax, the equivalent is not very large, at most people will be blown to pieces. This is not his nonsense. If his magic was not misunderstood, 2 unlucky were indeed blown to pieces. Just as his voice fell, there was another roar of firearms in the airship. The outer skin was pierced by the surging bullets, and the sound was loud and loud. Ryan listened to the pleasant sound coming from his ears, with a happy expression on his face, turned his head to Mel and said with a smile, the person who uses the gun is either a novice or a lunatic. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com is too bad. This bullet is enough to kill a 100 man squad, and she can only hit the target 4 or 5 times. Naku's the children of the world are much stronger than this. Sorry Meredith, I'm sorry, it seems that I need to excuse me. Mel's eyes flickered with anger, and he gestured to the law enforcement team that greeted Ryan, lining up and rushing towards the accident airship. Ryan smiled and looked at a few figures flying out of the airship on skateboards with green fire, and then ordered, I need a living one. Follow your orders. Katarina silently pulled out the 2 daggers stuck behind her back, and her figure turned into an afterimage and disappeared in place. When she reappeared, she was already standing on the guardrail on the edge of the airport. The black boots stomped on the guardrail, and she stepped on the green fire skateboard at a very fast speed, and kicked the strong mohawk on it into the airport. Ignoring the obstructions of the other people on the green fire skateboard, she didn't make any stops. She stepped on the skateboard as a relay point and returned to the airport again, with the dagger on the strong man's neck. The rest of the people saw that she was so strong, and when they saw that the law enforcement officer was outflanking her, they had to give up and evacuate. I'm not sure about taking down their leader. Seeing Ryan's gaze, Katarina reported truthfully and honestly. She has reflected on what happened yesterday for a long time, and she will never make her own decisions until she has completed the task. There's no need to do this, their leader has nothing to do with us, it's our MP Merdalda who should worry about it. Ryan gestured to the other side with interest. After receiving the report from the magistrate, Mel's face was not so bad. Mr. Merdalda, you seem to have found something. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask for something. Ryan paced to Mel's side, followed by Katarina, who was watching the burly man. Seeing the purple droplets dripping down from the airship, he knew what happened without the other person answering. According to Naku's intelligence records, a genius alchemist in Zon invented an alchemical potion called Shimmer, which can tap and release the potential of the human body. But unfortunately, it is addictive if it is not universal, and it has a huge loss of physical function for weak individuals, so it is not suitable for popularization in Nakus. And on this airship, it is the shimmering medicine that is transported. Your Excellency Meredith, this matter has nothing to do with you. Mel was tough. But your people don't seem to find any clues about the attacker, and I have a living trophy. Ryan shrugged slightly and motioned Katarina to press the prisoner forward. When it comes to killing people, Katarina is very professional. Correspondingly, any means of committing suicide as a prisoner would be futile. Not to mention, this green moxie sturdy guy dressed as a hippie doesn't look like a hard bone no matter what. Mel focused on the strong man, her brows furrowed. She knew very well that the other party would not give it to her easily, but this was the only way out of the attackers, and it was the key to understanding the situation. There have been more than one similar incidents this year. Fortunately, the airships that were attacked were loaded with contraband. All parties deliberately did not want to put things on the bright side, and this maintained the peace of Pigeon as before. Her expression changed a few times, her mind turned sharply, and in the end she had to grit her teeth and say, "What do you want?" "The shimmering potion left in this ship." Seeing Mel's expression suddenly became serious, Ryan seemed to inadvertently add, "Piltover's code is people-oriented. Even if you get this batch of contraband, the final result is to destroy it. Senator Merdalda, I think you should not mind exchanging them for friendship from Noxus." Hearing this Noxian threat, Mel's expression was complicated, as if he recalled his mother with a strong personality. Noxians were exactly the same. She was unwilling and wanted to argue with reason. The side effects of low light are very strong, and Noxus should not need such inferior means. Of course, the Empire agrees that this kind of medicine cannot be directly assembled for the army, but this does not mean that shimmer has no research value. I personally have some interest in this. Ryan did not hide it. He doesn't mind that the other party knows his purpose. He is not alone, with the whole of Noxus leaning on his back. It's just Piltover, and there's no need for detours. I think Senator Merdalda will not refuse this exchange. Ryan seemed to lose his patience and began to rub the ring on his right hand. Seeing the deep blue light on the ring in Ryan's hand, Mel was forced to make a choice no matter how unwilling he was. She sighed helplessly, "I agree to your request." Ryan, who received a satisfactory answer, put down his right hand and showed a friendly smile. "Thank you to MP Merdalda for being willing to meet my little request, which made me feel the enthusiasm of Piltover to welcome me." After receiving the gesture, Katarina kicked the bound captive and kicked it to a female law enforcement officer who had just arrived. When the two of Ryan were about to leave, the female marshal couldn't bear to look at the strong man who was kicked with broken bones, and finally couldn't help but ask, "Why do you take such a heavy hand? He has already been arrested by you." Hearing her words, Ryan's expression did not change, but Katarina looked at her in disbelief, and then looked at Mel who was beside him. That look seemed to ask why there were harmless sheep in the ranks of the pilgrim magistrates. "Miss Helamaine, I don't think you should be here at this time," Mel said coldly. "Member, something happened to the airport, I think I need me here." The female law enforcement officer was stubborn. "Hey, you haven't heard me yet. Mr. Merdalda, it's great to be born in Piltover. She matches your kindness very well. I look forward to our next cooperation." Ryan made a nonchalant comment, ignoring the rest, and calmly turned around and left. Piltover has a Noxus residence, where he has lived these days. Those shimmering potions he needed, he believed Mel would bring them there. The female law enforcement officer wanted to ask something, but Mel frowned and pulled her back, warning, "Caitlin Helamaine. Do your part and don't bring disaster to the Helamaine family." After saying this, he asked the middle-aged sheriff who was standing beside him to lead Ryan and the two to the Noxus embassy, while she was in charge of the rest of the troubles herself. Originally, these matters should be left to the sheriff, but Caitlin's appearance forced her to stay here to prevent accidents. Catelyn knows justice better than she does, but justice can't handle Noxus. Sure enough, within a few minutes, Caitlin found her again. "Are we really going to give them the contraband? Congressman, you're breaking Piltover's rules." "Rules? Noxus won't tell you the rules here." Mel stared coldly at Caitlin, whose face was covered with the word justice, and "Miss Jalaman, pay attention to your words. Don't say it's you, even your congressman's mother wouldn't speak like that in front of me." After all, she turned around with a frosty face, twisted her body and walked towards the airship. No one understands the power of Noxus better than her. Piltover must have the corresponding strength to defend his own rules. Maybe. Her eyes looked at another airship, the body of which was painted with a portrait of a young man, and the logo of a hammer was engraved on the edge. Mel's eyes became deep, and she knew in her heart that she should talk to him. Only he is the future of this city. After staying at the Naku's embassy, less than an hour later, a wooden barrel filled with purple liquid was sent to Ryan's new room, along with an invitation letter. The banquet invitation from the Merdalda family is actually represented by the Merdalda family of Nakus. That Miss Mel is really interesting. Katerina casually placed the invitation on the stone table in the room, with a smile on her face. Centripetal disdain. The ring on Ryan's right hand glowed faintly, his palm was open, a cloud of purple liquid was suspended above his palm, and mysterious runes flickered in it. It's not surprising. Do you really think she can become a member of parliament by herself? Except for Heimerdinger, the city's founder, there has never been a model in Piltover's history that only relies on personal strength to become a member of parliament. It's just a surprise, father. Duke Quaco often tells me that she was banished to Piltover by Lady Merdalda because of her innocence and kindness, and she was the daughter of the most unsuccessful general in Nakus. Katerina was half leaning against the wall, mocking in her expression. In a sense, she is no different from Mel now. It's just that her father was more ruthless, and gave himself directly to the Lord in front of him. But she does not reject this feeling, the weak should be enslaved. Ryan is a model who has climbed to a high position by relying on personal strength since the beginning. Compared to her father, Yu reading www.peoplelikeYuYuGonshu.com are more worthy of her loyalty. Your father and Mrs. Merdalda don't deal with it. He has to listen selectively. Mel is not exiled, but is in charge of all her family's resources in Piltover. Over the years, her family's army can suppress your father, because of the huge amount of money you have drawn from Piltover. Ryan narrated in a flat tone while analyzing the glimmer of the rune he manipulated. He is not too familiar with both sides, but he has seen them both. Compared with Mel's mother's thick and thin wrists, Duke Quaco, the madman who only understands war, is much worse. However, he heard his old boss say that Katerina's mother is very unusual, and it's hard to say who is stronger than the other. I don't need to understand this. Do you want to prepare the afternoon banquet for you? Katerina doesn't care about these family secrets, and cares more about what Ryan needs her to do. She has a very clear position on herself, the sharpest blade in the hands of the strong, and this is the belief that Duke Quaco has always instilled in her. We will go together in the afternoon. Ryan nodded slightly and continued to manipulate the rune in his hand with all his heart. When Katerina bowed to leave, he seemed to remember something and added, "Find someone from Pitchin to dress you up, and you will attend the banquet as my female companion." Katerina paused as she walked to the door, her expression a little hesitant to speak. Ryan, who knew what she was thinking, didn't even turn his head, and said calmly, "This is a required course if you want to transform. I don't need a weapon that can only fight and kill. Follow your will." The resistance in Katerina's expression disappeared, and after a respectful salute, she closed the door for Ryan. After Katerina left, Ryan was preoccupied with the twilight. The full name of the continent they are in is Valoran, and the alias is called Runeland. A mage who has been wandering for countless years once said that mastering the runes is equivalent to understanding the mysteries of magic. Except for very few cases, the birth of every mage is destined, and the strength of the awakening moment determines the height that can be reached in the future. Unless, can penetrate more secrets of runes. When Ryan first arrived in Valoran, he awakened to water attribute magic, and the magic power was extremely powerful. After joining Nakus, he continued to make military exploits, and the mages of the Nakus Empire were all open to him. This is also what he likes most about Nakus. As long as there is strength and merit, the Empire will not be stingy with any rewards. Ryan's palm once again had a rune like the word water rising, and his eyes showed a rare trace of reminiscence. This is the first rune he has mastered, and it is the water rune that suits him the most. I still remember that time in the desert area of Shurima, he and his boss encountered Shurima's quicksand army. For the first time, he used the magic in his body to outline the runes, the huge rune magic circle manifested, and the large tracts of yellow sand were wetted by the rain and turned into soil. After fighting for a whole day, Shurima's quicksand army was buried in the dirt by him and his comrades, and they built a new Noxtara, which was a symbol of Shurima's surrender to Naxos. As his thoughts turned around, more runes emerged from his palms, and the runes exuded dark blue light, surrounding the purple shimmer, and from time to time blue threads passed through the shimmer potion. Soon, Rune gave Ryan the answer. Through the analysis of multiple runes, although he was unable to create the shimmer, he almost understood its secret. He never imagined that there was another way to steal the power of magic besides the hex technology created by Piltover. In the shimmering purple light, he seemed to see a magic that could be named variable. This kind of magic can rudely open the door to the potential of the human body, but unfortunately, I don't know if it is limited by the creator's psychology or ability. Shimmer did not control the violent force of the magic, but only rudely made it merge with the human body. Makes the uncontrollable magic even more violent. Wonderful design, crazy ideas. Such a character should come to Naxos, and only there can show his talent. Ryan felt a little regretful. The producer of Shimmer was obviously born in the wrong place, and this kind of person has no future in Piltover. In the end, he was either driven mad by Zahn in the lower city, or tried by the magistrate of Piltover in the upper city. Thinking of Piltover's progressive code based on the code of human nature, a sneer appeared on Ryan's face. It's absurd to talk about human nature in a precarious world. Ionia has its own outstanding strength. What is Piltover? Heimerdinger, who lived to be 300 years old. Or the rookie Jace Towers Liss. Boom. 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 Hearing the knock on the door, Ryan threw the shimmer into the bucket and withdrew the runes that spread out from the palm of his hand. Your Excellency, the time is up. Let's go then, Miss Katarina. As the door opened, Ryan was greeted by a well-dressed noble lady. The black close-fitting dress perfectly showed Katarina's figure, and her long burgundy hair was drooping down behind her, scattered and graceful. Facing the well-dressed Katarina, Ryan felt a little awkward. After looking around with admiring eyes, he sighed and shook his head. The makeup is in place, but your expression is too stiff. A qualified assassin has to learn to adapt to various identities, at least how to play various roles. He doesn't know that either. Katarina was a little dissatisfied. You don't need to compare with him, you will definitely be better than him in the future. Ryan's eyes were encouraging. I'm more optimistic about you, you can become the most outstanding assassin. Immediately afterwards, he ignored Katarina's strange expression, and walked out naturally, holding her arm. I only cooperate with you once, try to be a noble lady of the KKO family, understand but don't indulge. I'll try my best. Katarina tried her best to restrain herself, maintained an awkward smile, and kept trying to relax her body and let herself adapt to her current state. Sitting in the mechanical car heading to the banquet hall, Katarina was relieved when Ryan let go. As if to relieve the previous embarrassment, she pointed to the soft pad under her body and curiously said, driven by pure machinery, is it a unique technological product of Piltover? Ryan lifted a corner of the car curtain and admired the downtown street scene of Pitchin outside the window. The mechanical car originated from Victor, a student of Heimerdinger. He was determined to use technology to change the city and invented various machines to improve people's livelihood. His ideals are beautiful, but the reality is extremely ironic. With a mockery of the city on his face, Ryan said in a strange tone, all the machinery is only used in Piltover, the upper city, and the Zon people in the lower city are still living a life that is not as good as a dog. A bridge is separated, and the difference is barren. You seem to admire this person. After Katarina finished speaking, she seemed to be defending herself and added, I'm trying to adapt to my current role. I really admire this person. After that, Ryan smiled and encouraged, "Just say whatever comes to mind. I don't agree with the ruthless way your father upholds. Sometimes I am more curious about the world. Which will make you grow faster. But that's the way of mages." Katerina felt that this sentence went against her education. Using wisdom and hex crystals, Jace Talus pried open the door to magic. "Why do you think you can't?" Ryan asked. "I don't have such a smart brain." Katerina shook her head. "Victor was Jace's helper, and I think he played a more important role in Hex's research, so I admire him a lot," Ryan said. "What does this have to do with me?" Katerina didn't understand why she turned back to the previous topic. "You think I'm worse than the two of them?" Ryan asked rhetorically. "Your Excellency is far stronger than the two combined." This is by no means touted by Katerina. The heroic story of Nakus will spread throughout the Empire. Among those heroes, Ryan in front of him is definitely one of the most outstanding. Not only has powerful magic, whether it is alchemy, war command, assassination, or medical treatment, magic research, Ryan has corresponding brilliant deeds. Ryan Meredith's name is a symbol of excellence in the eyes of Noxians. How could such a person be comparable to two ordinary scientists in Pitchin? Then why do you think that you can't master magic? Ryan's words were meaningful. Hearing this sentence, Katerina's expression froze, and immediately felt a little ridiculous. If Ryan was just Victor, she didn't doubt that she could be Jace. But Ryan, is he really qualified to carry this excellence? Don't think about it, it is because you are optimistic about your potential that I brought you with me. I believe you will not live up to my expectations, Miss Katerina. If I have the potential, I won't be here. I should be involved in more killings with the army. Katerina expressed her dissatisfaction with herself. Potential always needs time to be realized. Even if you have the idea of not betraying the trust of others, you should do better. Well, it's time for us to get off. When the mechanical car drove to the location, Ryan got out of the car first and extended his hand to Katerina in the car, behaving like a nobleman. Your Excellency, I will try my best. Katerina had an awkward smile on her face, which was much better than her previous stiff smile. It could be seen that she was trying hard to adapt herself to her current identity. Ryan smiled and pulled Katerina's fair hand, making her stand up and get out of the car along the pole. He was looking forward to the banquet later, not only to see the new performance of his new subordinates, but also to meet some interesting people. Ryan helped himself and Katerina tidied up their clothes, and then followed the waiter's guidance and led Katerina into the Medarda family's banquet hall. When Ryan took Katerina into the banquet hall, the eyes of all the nobles present were focused on him. They all stopped their original conversation and raised their glasses together to greet him. This banquet was originally used to gather everyone on the day of evolution to raise money for the Merdalda family who were fighting. But with Ryan's entry, the previous purpose is no longer important. They came together to welcome the Noxian emissary. "Good afternoon, sir, you can call me Polpak, a loyal business partner of Nakus." "Good afternoon, on behalf of the Helamain family, I offer my sincere apologies to your Excellency. What happened this morning was abrupt by the little girl. Gin, I am Stephen, the head of the Philos family. I heard about your deeds from the Battle of Presidion, and I admire you very much." Pitchin nobles rushed to Ryan's side like bees, seeing that his eyes were like sweet honey, his face was full of enthusiasm, and they sent blessings without rudeness. At this time, Ryan didn't reject people like he used to, but instead returned the salute with a smile and wrote down the names of these people. After about half an hour, he got rid of the group of nobles, holding a glass of wine in his hand, and leading the somewhat numb Katerina towards Mel. "I hope I didn't ruin your plan today, Senator Merdalda." Ryan raised his glass slightly. "The fundraising went well. My mother told me since I was a child that I should keep all the variables in my hands." Mel smiled and clinked glasses with Ryan and drank the wine in the glass. "Do you think you can control everything?" Katerina couldn't help but said. It was torture for her to let assassins attend the banquet. The people around her were too enthusiastic, but she could see the fakeness of these people. She found that this kind of situation was completely out of her control, and it was not as simple and direct as stabbing a human body with a sharp blade to kill. Mel looked Katerina up and down, and the corners of his mouth raised slightly. Miss KKO, I don't need and can't control everything, I just need to know the protagonist today. Lord Meredith. Katerina was even more puzzled. Ryan didn't seem like someone who could be counted by Mel. Being able to walk into the banquet hall means that we are not enemies. I am not an Oxian, but my mother is. I heard that Your Excellency and my mother have a good relationship. I've only met Mrs. Merdalda a few times, but my former boss has a good personal relationship with her. Now that your mother is in a lot of trouble, I think I should help you if I can. Ian took a sip of wine. He had to admit that Meyer has a remarkable political talent, and can quickly detect and adapt to changes in various relationships. His previous meeting with Mel couldn't have given him a good face. Mel was born in Naxos but had Piltover's stance, and he represented Naxos. Mel seemed to think of this very quickly, and it didn't take long before he sent him an invitation in the name of Naxos Merdalda. Those alone, Mel's talent is enough for Ryan to appreciate. If you really want to replace Mel with Katerina, even if the two have similar resources, it will definitely become a mess. Of course, if these two were thrown into the lower city of Zon, it would be a completely different ending. My mother has a lot of troubles. Since I was a child, she was either in war or on her way to the battlefield. Mel's face was helpless. There are very few generals as pure as her in Naxos, and there are only her, General Darius and Major General Clay. Ryan said with a trace of regret. How can I remember that General KKO is also, and his eldest daughter, Miss KKO, has the name of a genius assassin, and will definitely take his place in the future. With a charming smile on her face, Mel raised the wine glass in her hand to Katerina. With discomfort on her face, Katerina clinks glasses with Mel in silence, and drank the wine in her glass. She is a competitive person, but in the current situation, she feels clumsy and terrifying, and she is far less adept than the woman in front of her. Sooner or later, Katerina's potential is no worse than mine. Ryan said with a smile, but in comparison, you seem to care more about your protagonist, and even can't wait. His eyes turned to a sturdy young man in the hall, and he noticed that Mel's eyes were always looking at that man unconsciously. Of course, Ryan has seen the photo of the young man no less than 10 times, hanging on the streets and alleys of Piltover. He is the genius of Piltover Gestalis. Sorry, but he is really our Piltover's baby. I never thought that a child born in an ordinary family would have such excellent talent. Mel's face was apologetic, but his words were full of amazement. Excellent talent and talent. But still like a young child, you Piltover-born people seem to have this problem. Ryan's gaze only stayed on the big boy for a second, and then he turned his gaze to the young man on crutches on the other side. The body as thin as a bamboo pole seemed to be about to fall down immediately, and his face was even more ill. The young man on crutches is Victor, a scientist far better than Jace in his mind. Mel heard Ryan's voice, looked at Jess with blurry eyes, shook his head and said, after all, people always need experience to grow. Piltover is a good stage, I can give him time. Betting on the future of a city. Ryan raised his brows slightly, showing a little more interest. Your Excellency, this is not a gamble, but a step into a new future. He is our treasure boy. Mel had confidence on his face. Ryan can feel that Mel seems to have more confidence in the future of Jace Tallis than that Mr. Tallis himself. He could see that the Jace was still confused, like a puppy seeking comfort. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. When the two of them were talking, Jace also saw this side, and when he saw Mel, his face showed surprise. He strode over and whispered in Mel's ear with an anxious expression, "Can you take a step to speak?" Mel looked at Ryan embarrassedly and said apologetically, "Sorry sir, I may have to excuse me for a while." "It's okay, I hope you can chat happily with your treasure boy." Ryan raised his glass without hesitation, and quietly watched Jace, who had an eager face, lead Mel out of the banquet hall. It seems that the little milk dog has found its owner, and now it's time to appease it. When the backs of the two disappeared, Ryan withdrew his playful gaze. "Is he Jace Tallis?" Katerina asked curiously. "If it's a fake replacement, I don't have any knowledge in terms of wisdom, but the physique is not inferior to the elite soldiers of the Empire. This is already commendable in Piltover," Ryan commented. "He looks like a hairy boy. It's hard to believe that he can achieve high achievements in science." "I'm a little more confident in what you say now," Katerina said seriously. "Which sentence did I say?" Ryan seemed a little surprised. "If Jace is this virtuous, then I think I can master magic too," Katerina said firmly. Jace's first impression of her was really bad. She doesn't understand science, but when she thinks about it, she should be able to do better than Jace. "Ha ha ha, Miss Katerina, please maintain this confidence at all times. This is what I admire most about you." Ryan would see Victor sitting alone, and motioned to Katerina in his direction. "Now, it's time for us to meet Jace's assistant. You and Mel seem to have different ideas. She is very optimistic about Jace, but you chose Victor." Katerina shook her head and followed Ryan. Ryan also didn't care whether Victor could hear him or not, and said without hesitation, "Hex technology has infinite potential. Since you have to choose one, why not choose the one that you think is better? We are all right," she believes that only newer technologies can be tapped. "In my eyes, those who have experienced the bottom life, people with clear goals are more valuable for investment. What do you think, Mr. Victor?" "I'm Ryan Meredith from Nakos." Ryan held out his hand to Victor. "Ryan Meredith, the legendary adjutant of Blood Mist. I didn't expect to see you in person." Victor's face was surprised. He reached out and shook hands with Ryan before letting go. "This is Piltover, and no matter how much he wants to come to Nakos, he won't find him in the banquet hall to fight with this disability. Adjutant of Blood Mist, a nostalgic title. Those Ionians think I am more bloodthirsty than demons, but unfortunately I am just protecting myself." Ryan spread his hands helplessly. "I really never thought that one day someone like you would be approached by a big man like you. Mr. Meredith means he wants to invest in me." Victor's face was not very interested, he just replied in a formulaic manner. Listening to Mr. Victor's tone, "I don't seem to be very interested. Unfortunately, I wanted to use magic to show you your body, or to talk about how to apply hex to the people's livelihood industry." Ryan's face was filled with regret, about to turn away. "Wait a minute. Mr. Meredith." Ryan paused and took a glass of wine from the waiter's hand. "Call me Ryan, your talent is worthy of respect." "Your Excellency Ryan. What you said before about magic, hex and people's livelihood." Victor coughed twice, breathing a little short, as if the drowning person caught the straw for survival. He was born in the lower city of Zon, and his body is already weak. Coupled with the close contact with the industrial wastewater and turbid air of Zon, it is a miracle that he can survive to this day. It's not that he hasn't tried the treatment, but it doesn't work at all. Even if he uses hex technology, he doesn't see any hope of surviving. Looking at his expression, Ryan couldn't help feeling that heaven was jealous of Yingke. He raised the wine glass in his hand and said, literally, "Drink this glass of wine, I think you will like it." Just as Victor wanted to apologize and said that his body couldn't stand alcohol, he saw Ryan's right hand lit up with a dark blue light, and a mysterious rune was embedded in the drink. He had seen that rune when he was researching Hextech, and it seemed to mean net. This time, he did not refuse, but took the wine glass curiously and stared at the dark blue liquid inside. "The magic is really exquisite, far better than the shock of Hextech." Victor sighed. "It's just a shoddy magic potion. Ryan disagreed. At most, it can delay the deterioration of your body. If you really want to recover, you have to make more preparations. That's enough, thank you very much for your help. Victor didn't doubt either, he drank the potion from the cup with a smile. The liquid was flowing in his body with warmth, and he felt that every cell in the body was rhythmically jumping. It seems that in 10 years, Victor has never felt that his body can be so full of vitality, like a dying old man rejuvenated. The effect is incredible. Victor's hands were shaking slightly with excitement, and his face was full of incredible colors. The hex they studied was a technological invention based on magic. He thought that hex was no longer inferior to magic. But it turns out that the two, at least from now on, are far from each other. Thank you again for your gift. Victor stood up and bowed deeply to Ryan. He is not afraid of death, but he wants to at least fulfill his wish before he dies. Originally, he was desperate. Heimerdinger denied his and Jace's research, and his body could hardly hold it anymore. Unexpectedly, all this seems to have ushered in the dawn. Victor raised his head, looked at Ryan carefully, and asked tentatively, Your Excellency Ryan, did you say that Hextech is used for people's livelihood? You should know about Nakos. Although it occupies the largest land in the center of Valoran, due to some historical reasons, most of the land in the Empire is desert, and ordinary technology can't bring it back to life. I have heard of it, so Nakos will continue to launch wars and plunder the resources needed for survival. Victor nodded in understanding. Born in Zon, he can understand this feeling. The living environment of people in the lower city is not better than that of Noxians. If you want to survive, you can only fall into darkness. From there he swore an oath to use his knowledge to change Zon and make Zon as rich as Piltover. Ryan's words resonated in his heart. He is happy to discuss these kinds of issues with each other. Victor, with your knowledge, how many options are there to improve the environment in Nakos? Ryan suddenly turned to ask. Well, about 3. Victor thought for a while, then raised 3 fingers. Ryan showed an attitude of listening and made a gesture of please. The best and easiest way, as Nakos is doing. Victor said seriously, war. Plunder resources from other regions. To cure the symptoms but not the root cause, the essence still needs support from other regions. With the growth of the population, dissatisfaction between regions will intensify, unless the war continues to control the population. Ryan shook his head. It's something Nakos has always done, but it's also something he and his old boss don't want to do. The power of the Empire should be concentrated on doing more meaningful things, rather than being consumed by some meaningless war. The other 2 methods are to fundamentally improve the deserts of Nakos. Victor said in a serious tone, technology and magic. I underestimated the power of magic before. There are quite a few mages in Nakos. With the magic ability displayed by Lord Ryan, they can completely purify the entire Nakos. Originally, when he studied Hex, he knew clearly that Hex technology was just a substitute for magic, and it was to enable ordinary people to use magic. Now that he has personally experienced Ryan's amazing magic, he feels that the existing Hex invention is still a long way from the real magic, which is also the direction he will study in the future. Magic can indeed do it, but it is time-consuming and labor-intensive, and it is necessary to form a team of mages for energy maintenance. The value that a magist can create is far greater than doing these things, and the Empire will not agree to this proposal. Ryan shook regretfully, shaking his head. Whether it is the incompetent Emperor today, or his old boss who is extremely wise and rational, he will not allow a powerful and rare mage to do these things. That can only be the use of technology. Victor said here, and understood Ryan's intention to find him. You want to use Hex technology to change the land of Nakos? I don't think Piltover will hand over the Hex technology. Victor is not optimistic about this. He actually wants to help Nakos, not only because Nakos is very similar to the Zon he was born, but also because it will provide him with a lot of data support for restoring the ecology of the lower city. But unfortunately, in his expectation, Piltover and Jess will definitely not agree to hand over this technology, even if it is only used to improve people's livelihood, in order to save more people. Ha ha ha, Victor, don't underestimate Nakos. With that said, the corners of Ryan's mouth were slightly upturned, and when he turned his palm over, a dark blue crystal bead appeared in his hand. Hex crystal? How is that possible? Victor exclaimed, as if he saw something that shouldn't have appeared. It's no surprise that the hex crystal was not created by you and Jace. Although you have gone further on this road, you still can't control it. Ryan said meaningfully. But, the Council should have controlled the production and use of all crystals. Victor hesitated. Ryan handed the crystal to Victor indifferently, with a smile on the corner of his mouth. So, you are a scientist. He pointed to the group of nobles who sang and danced, and said, they are politicians. And I. He finally pointed his fingertips at himself. Seeing that Ryan was not talking, Victor answered tentatively, Mage. No. Ryan shook his head and replied with a smile, it's a Noxian. It seems that Lord Ryan has a strong sense of belonging to the Noxian Empire. Victor thought of Zon, and inevitably felt a little sad. It's not just about belonging, but the Empire gave me the confidence to speak. To be honest, I don't have the outstanding military force of General Darius, and I can't compare to Professor Heimerdinger in terms of technology, and even less in terms of mana. Karma, the apocalypse. But I am standing on the land of Pitchin, but no one can say no to me. Ryan said calmly. Victor stared deeply at Ryan, non-committal to his words. Nakos is powerful, but it is precisely because of the gathering of a group of people as powerful as Ryan that it is strong. Ryan can represent Nakos because he is one of the strongest people in Nakos. He is different, he has Zon in his heart and wants to change Zon. But the identity is only a research assistant, and the reputation and prestige are far less than that of Jace. If this goes on, how can he transform Zon? Victor was silent for a while, and some unexpected thoughts suddenly appeared in his heart. After thinking for a moment, he looked around, except for Katarina's erratic eyes that seemed to be doing nothing, no one paid attention to them. He hesitated for a while, and finally said with a bewildered expression, Your Excellency Ryan, I want to ask something. He didn't know why he would ask the people in front of him for advice. They were obviously the same age, but he felt that he had nothing to hide in front of them. I'm happy to answer your questions. Ryan showed a friendly smile. He was delighted to see the genius in front of him open up to him, and the doors of Nakos were always open to each other. Victor had a distressed look on his face. You said before that we can't control the hex crystal. Actually, Professor Heimerdinger said something similar a few hours ago. But I can hear the difference between the two of you, Professor, thinking that the redevelopment of Hextech will have extremely serious consequences. But in your tone, I can hear something else. I agree with Heimerdinger, but my position is a little different from what he sees, Ryan said. We just want to apply it to people's livelihood, so that the lives of the people of Zon can be completely improved. Victor was slightly excited. I can understand your feelings, it's consistent with my feelings for Nakos. Ryan reached out and patted Victor on the shoulder, and the words changed, but have you ever thought about it? You can control it. They are already very stable and will not cause accidental damage. Speaking of professionalism, Victor's face is full of confidence. Ryan shook his head and said, No, I'm not Heimerdinger. I don't think about the harm caused by accidents. I just want to ask you, what would the Zon do if they mastered Hextech? They will. Victor wanted to talk about the manpower savings they use technology to save, and talk about the Zon people out of poverty. But when he saw Ryan's half-smiling face, he realized that this was not what the other party seemed to want to hear. Ryan suddenly turned his head to Katarina next to him, and asked casually, 100 warriors guarded by lesser against 1,000 ordinary tribal warriors of Fruljord. In the absence of leading intervention, this battle will be what will be the result. The lesser garrison is the most elite army under the Emperor Nakus, while the Fruljord is located in the far north of the Valoran continent, where most uncivilized tribes live. Katarina sneered, "Don't say 100, as long as 10 Reese guards can slaughter all the enemies." "The reason?" Ryan smiled. "The equipment gap is too big. Even if Fruljord's stone spear breaks, it can't break the armor of the Razor garrison, not to mention that the Razor garrison still has a lot of special alchemy equipment." Katarina curled her lips. Said, "If you really want to be evenly matched, you have to fight against the warriors of the Avarasa tribe, and the number must be 5 times more than that of Reese's garrison." Ryan focused his eyes on Victor again and said earnestly, "I think this metaphor should be able to answer your doubts, scientist." He reread the last 3 words, as if deliberately trying to wake up the other's innocence. Victor smiled wryly, lowered his head, and struggled to explain, "As long as there are restrictions, reading www.uuganshu.com hextech can't be used in war." After he finished speaking, he felt that what he said was so pale and powerless. Just like Ryan can get hex crystals, they are just Pichin researchers, and it is difficult to have a way to limit them. "I always thought that this sentence of yours would come from Jace's mouth." Ryan said, somewhat surprised, "Do you remember the environment in which you were born?" "Deep impression." Victor's face was filled with reminiscence. How could he forget what he saw and heard in Zon? That's why he wants to use technology to change Zon. "Think about your original intention and why you stayed in Piltover. You're a smart person, but you've been in Piltover for a long time." Out of the corner of the eye, Mel and Jace came out of nowhere. Ryan stood up and said with a smile, "The conversation with you today was very pleasant. If you need any help, you can come to the Naku's embassy to find me. Today, you helped me solve my doubts." "I should thank you." Victor's face was embarrassed. The moment Ryan finished his last sentence, he had already figured out all the problems. The other party was right. "I stayed in Piltover for so long that I forgot that I was a Zon." Looking at the back of Ryan's departure, Victor's eyes were filled with a little gratitude and the firmness of wanting to accomplish something. At night, the most important moment of Piltover's Evolution Day comes. Evolution Day speech. Today's speaker is Piltover's most famous Jace Tallis. In the Piltover lecture hall, everyone watched the tall boy on the podium with anticipation, expecting him to describe what new inventions in Piltover this year. Jace stood on the podium with a green and shy expression on his face. "Well, I know that many people here will be surprised to see that I am here to speak tonight. To be honest, I am just like you." In the front row of the podium, Ryan, dressed in traditional Noxian red aristocratic costume, leaned on the back of the chair and said softly to Katarina next to him, "Piltover's rising star, Jess Tallis. He is known as a promoter who can advance Piltover and human civilization." Jace stood on the podium, his eyes focused on the mother in the first row below, and he narrated, "I come from an ordinary family. The factory in my family makes hammers. Maybe the floor tiles under your feet were knocked out with my hammer. No one has ever had any hope for me in my life." Katarina listened to Jace's speech with disapproval in her eyes. "The flaw is too big. Even if he can change the world, that's the future. I'm confident to solve him within 10 seconds. Ryan said dumbly, "Don't always use force to measure a person's achievements. We in Nakus are not only warriors. Whether it is politics, scientific research, strategy, or business, a skill can earn our respect." But I didn't see his extraordinariness. He was more like a politician who commended his achievements, and he had the same virtue as the nobles in the Immortal Fortress. Listening to Jace's rhetoric about the changes made by Hextech, Katarina had a look of disgust on her face. She hates formalism. Soldiers fight on the battlefield, and scientists should study in the laboratory. This is her personal opinion. Ryan looked at the high-spirited Jace above, with uncertainty and hesitation in his tone. From the tone and the wording, he should have rarely experienced such occasions. But he is trying to adapt and enjoy it. I have not seen what he looked like when he studied, but from today's performance, he has born with a talent for speaking. He is very suitable for being a leader. At this time, Jace happened to narrate the climax. His right index finger pointed on the wooden podium, making a dull sound, arousing everyone's fiery emotions aroused by him. With solemnity on his face, it is precisely because of the various changes brought about by Hextech that today's moment is particularly extraordinary. Jace pointed out the window at the towering building that was lit up like a cloud and glowed with Hex blue light. A few years ago, Hexfield brought the world together and made Piltover more prosperous than anyone could have imagined. With his arms outstretched, the Piltover crowd cheered unsympathetically, as if celebrating the evolution of Piltover. On the contrary, the two of Ryan seemed out of place in such a scene. False prosperity. Katarina looked disdainful. Wouldn't it be nice to immerse them in it? Nakus doesn't participate in their operations, but the revenue is far more than Pitchin. It must be said that it is a kind of irony. Ryan smiled. Undoubtedly, the more Piltover made, the more Nakus was funded. Of course, these nobles will not earn less, and Mrs. Piltover's life can also be slightly changed, almost winning. To say that the only unfavorable group is the people who live in the lower city. The gap between the rich and the poor and the upper city have further widened. Nominally, they are considered to be a family in a city, but if they really want to divide resources, they are not a group anymore. Ryan looked backstage, and could vaguely see the figure holding a cane. With the cooperation of Victor, Zon, and Lady Piltover, Piltover ushered in development, and what did Zon get? The corners of Ryan's mouth rose slightly, as if looking forward to it. Jess's speech is still going on. After the small climax just now, it is an important part of this year's technology demonstration. The exploration is still going on. We have prepared something new for you this year. This batch of inventions. Speaking of this, everyone noticed that there was a visible hesitation on Jace's face. The most important link, he actually went wrong. What is he hesitating about? Katarina raised her brows. Remember Victor's conversation with us at the banquet. Ryan didn't show the slightest surprise. Victor. At that time he said that Heimerdinger denied their invention. Katarina suddenly looked at a seat in the first row with enlightened eyes. A short, yellow-haired man sat on a chair. He is Heimerdinger, the founder of Pi City. But his mood was clearly not at all good at the moment, staring gloomily at Jace. Katarina took her eyes back, and there was an interesting look on her face. The new and the old collide. Your Excellency, how do you think Jace will choose? Ryan tapped the back of the chair with his knuckles, and said succinctly, from what he said in the previous sentence, it has been proved that he is nothing more than that. To choose means to lose, and he has made a choice for the topic of Weinwen. Perhaps the scientist was thinking about the danger of the invention and didn't realize the seriousness of the problem. Katarina sneered. She had noticed that when Jace was hesitating, all Piltover MPs didn't look good. Jace struggled for a while, then took a deep breath and solemnly promised, the new technology will be shared with you as soon as possible. Waiting for the technology to mature. Feeling the disappointment of the people below, he hurriedly added, in the vision of my partner Victor, once this technology is completed, whether it is the children of high-level families or the laborers living in the bottom city, everyone will be free from hard labor. At this moment, he hadn't noticed that Victor, who had been waiting in the backstage to show off the new technology, was not disappointed, but a kind of relief from letting go. And Mel, who was below, stood up with a gloomy face, and took the butler out of the venue first. At the same time, Jess is still eloquently reciting his promise to the future, we vow to keep seeking and live up to our reputation as a city of progress. Our future is bright. Following Jace's sonorous and powerful words, grand fireworks exploded in midair, and through the transparent glass, one could feel the beauty of the sky filled with fireworks of various colors. The audience enjoyed the fireworks, immersed in the beauty of the fireworks and the promise made by Jace. Most people believe that Jace will lead Piltover to become more prosperous. Katarina retracted her gaze and said regretfully, he chose to compromise, and sooner or later, he will hurt himself and Piltover because of looking ahead. For him, this is already the best ending. Ryan shook his head and expressed his opinion, it not only follows Heimerdinger's advice, but also leaves expectations for everyone. Mel made it clear and saved her friendship. He didn't know what Mel and Jace had privately talked about before, but judging from Mel's angrily leaving the venue, it was supposed to demonstrate the new hex technology tonight, but Jace chose to give up. But Ryan knew in his heart that Mel was a smart person, and as long as Jace was still valuable, she would take the initiative to repair the relationship. In comparison, the talent and value of another person are not bad, and they are more worthy of his expectation. Ryan glanced meaningfully at the backstage of the lecture hall, got up and left the venue with Katarina. The plan couldn't keep up with the changes. Perhaps it won't be long before the Nako's embassy welcomes its first guest. In the dark, Ryan and Cortina walked on the white stone brick floor and walked towards the Nako's embassy not far away. As they walked, Ryan and Katarina stopped at the same time. Pitchin is really a city with excellent security. Ryan suddenly sighed. Katarina sneered, an airship was blown up in the airport in the morning, and another building was blown up in the evening. Are all the law enforcement officers in Pitchin eating dry food, and they will only rush to the scene to clean up the mess after the incident? Not far from the two of them, firelight shrouded half of the sky, and the roar of explosives could be heard endlessly. A low-rise building burst like fireworks, and many surrounding buildings were affected by pond fish, making the sound of walls cracking. Your Excellency, do we need to intercept it? Katarina asked. Ryan shook his head lightly, with a thoughtful expression on his face. The two of them quietly watched a delinquent girl with blue double ponytails go away smartly, and the girl made a face at them before leaving. This girl has also appeared in the airport before. According to the information he received before, she is the person who is currently in control of Zon, Shirko. She seems to be called Jinx. And if he read it right, Jinx is holding a hex crystal in his hand. The energy structure contained in it is completely different from the one he gave to Victor. To be more stable, it should be the new hex crystal not shown today. Technology. It was the police officer in the morning. Luckily, the only survivor. It seems to be Gila Man. The two walked to the site of the incident and found Caitlin still breathing on the ground. Katarina frowned slightly, a little surprised. Caitlin Gila-Main. Her mother, Mrs. Gila-Main, is a member of parliament for Piltover. She herself has a lot of disputes with her mother because she abides by justice and insists on working on the front line. Ryan said calmly, pacing towards Caitlin, the ring in his hand lit up with blue light. Blue raindrops swayed down from the top of Caitlin's head, the water droplets warmed her body, and her injuries recovered at a visible speed. After doing this, he turned his head to the side, and Jace was standing nervously. He was the first to arrive at the scene other than the Ryan duo, and the explosion took place in his laboratory. That's all I can do. She should be able to wake up after a while. Ryan said flatly. Thank you for your help, Mr. Meredith. Jace bowed to Ryan and hurriedly squatted down to help Caitlin up. At this time, the law enforcement officers who arrived late also acted to clean up the chaotic post-disaster scene. Seeing the charred corpses being carried out, Jace looked sad. Mr. Meredith, I heard Mel mention you. But I'm really sorry for showing you the worst of Piltover. Ryan looked indifferent, looking behind him through Jace. In the shadow of the building not far away, Victor is standing there hesitantly. The continent of Valoran is not peaceful. Such things happen from time to time, even the immortal fortress of Nakos. Is there any clue to the perpetrator? It should be done by the people from the lower city. Jace gritted his teeth and said, "Everyone belongs to Piltover, I can't think of why they would do this. Who are you all?" Ryan shook his head secretly, facing the idealist in front of him, and asked, "What do you think of Pichen and Zon? This is my first time here, but neither of what I've heard from the outside world or what I've seen with my own eyes, these two places can't be called a city." Jace held Caitlyn's hand tightly. "My partner is from Zon, and I have no prejudice against there." After he finished speaking, let alone Ryan, even Katarina couldn't help but look at him strangely. If there is really no prejudice, is it necessary to emphasize this sentence? Just when Ryan wanted to say something, Caitlyn opened her eyes weakly. "Jace." "Caitlyn, that's great, fortunately you're fine." Jace breathed a sigh of relief and gave Ryan an apologetic look. How are they?" Caitlyn struggled to get up, but her body's weakness made her unable to move. "Miss Helaman, my magic is only to help you recover from the trauma. The impact of the explosion on your body will have to keep you up for a while," Ryan said. "Who are you?" "The Noxians in the morning, why are you here?" Caitlyn frowned, she didn't have a good impression of Ryan and the two of them. "Caitlyn, it was Mr. Meredith who saved you. As for the other law enforcement officers..." Jace flashed sadness, his eyes unconsciously looking like those corpses. "How can it be?" Following his line of sight, Catelyn also saw a charred black lying not far away, her pupils shrunk, and she almost fainted again. "Do you have any clues? This attack is very unusual. Hex crystals were stolen, and several important research materials were also taken away." Jace's face was urgent. What was lost was very important. If they were obtained by those who could use them, it might lead to war. He only assured Heimerdinger and Meyer today that there would be no accident with Hextech, and he was a little ashamed that there was an accident in less than a day. This can't help but remind him of what happened a few years ago. It was also the theft of his hex crystal by the people in the lower city, the explosion of the laboratory, and a series of events that followed. But that time the result was not bad. Let him know Mel and Victor, and successfully researched Hextech. But this time, hope it's a good ending. Jace thought wildly, waiting for Caitlyn to recall what happened before. "Let me think." Caitlyn was lost in thought, sometimes frowning, sometimes distressed. After a while, she felt agitated all over her body, and she blurted out excitedly, "I remembered, and it was definitely made by the people from the lower city. It was a group of people who blew up the airship in the airport this morning." Jace also asked eagerly, "Is there a target of suspicion?" Caitlyn shook her head in distress. "I only know that the perpetrator will draw a monkey sign, and that sign is also on the airship in the airport. And I vaguely saw a blue-haired woman before I fell unconscious. I don't know the rest." "It's okay, knowing this information is enough," Jace comforted. "You don't need to worry about this matter, I'll check it out myself. The lower city is full of dirty mice." Caitlyn raised her brows slightly, her face stubborn, "Although I didn't have the chance to interrogate the prisoner in the airship at that time. But another gangster Mr. Meredith caught, and I got a lot of information from him. Can I hear his origins?" Ryan was interested. He didn't think the green-haired mouth was very strict at the time. "Of course." Caitlyn didn't mind either. "That guy belongs to the Wildfire Gang. UU reading www.uuganshu.com is said to be the biggest gang force in Zon." Hearing this, Ryan's expression gradually became weird. If Naku's information is correct, the biggest gang force in Zon should be Hiko, and the Wildfire Gang can only be considered a second-rate. They thought that Shimmer should not exist in this world, so that operation was to destroy Shimmer on the airship. Who is the person behind Shimmer? I heard from Mel that the ship was full of contraband. Jace said with disgust. He doesn't know that. Originally, we captured a prisoner of the forces behind Shimmer. But at that time, Senator Merdalda was busy sending Shimmer to the Noxians, and the sheriff wouldn't let me interrogate him. I can't help it. Caitlin looked regretful. It seems that she has a good relationship with Jace, and Caitlin added, but I'm not going to give up. I'll investigate it myself. Don't mess around, people in the lower city are very dangerous. I will propose in the parliament tomorrow to thoroughly investigate the lower city. I believe that Meyer and Professor Heimerdinger will agree. Jace's tone was firm. Ryan quietly listened to the conversation between the two, looking at a shadow behind Jace with playful eyes. Not knowing when it started, the person in the shadow disappeared. Mr. Tallis, Miss Helamaine. It's getting late. Have a nice evening. Jace nodded solemnly to Ryan. Mr. Meredith, on behalf of Piltover, I would like to express my gratitude for today's matter, and thank you for your help. Small problem, I hope Pitchin can have a quiet tomorrow. Ryan waved his hand and took Katarina away without looking back. Piltover, things seem to be getting more interesting.